great day, everyone.
Front of the car or the back?
We're running just a bit late.
How about here?
Climb on board and please come back and forth, and we don't want to send you down busting your behind. That's why you should keep that bottom planted in your seats at all times for your personal safety. Never really a need to switch sides. If you're on the right side now, stick to that up and down, and vice versa if you're on the left. Don't switch sides, because we turn the train around on a giant loop, giving you a different view on the way down. Let's move on to rule number 2. You're going to want to keep your hands and arms inside the rail cars and don't grab the nearby vegetation alongside the tracks. Mixed in with all the greenery out there is going to be lots of fresh poison oak growing in strong. Poison oak is a horrible rash and it's not the best souvenir. Hands and arms, keep them inside the cars. You should be in your seat at all times throughout the ride, but this end platform at the ends of the cars where the steps are completely off limits. And if you have any small children in one of the corner seats of these canopy cars, if you come to an abrupt stop, very small children might get pitched up by a row of about 30 adults coming into them. We recommend adults sit in the corners. Over 100 tons of rolling momentum here on that steep mountain. Children under 2 are completely free as long as they're riding in your lap. Last and not least, there's no smoking allowed anytime on board the train, and also no smoking up in the Redwoods at our stop at the top. We'll have about an 8-minute break up at Baer Mountain. You'll be able to get off and stretch your legs, and restrooms will be available halfway through the train ride. Seats, it's time to roll. All right, all 56 wheels are rolling. I don't see anyone waving yet. Come on, you're on a train. It's what you do. It's called tradition. And also good luck. Wave anyone you see out of town. Goodbye. Coming around this big right-hand curve up here, you guys will get a good shot of the design of that old antique steaming locomotive warming up. It is not your conventional type of steam engine like you'd always see in those old western films that would fly on those mainline tracks at a high speed. Our engine was never built for speed at all. It's all about the power. is quite a unique steam engine. It is gear-driven and all-wheel drive, designed to operate on a logging railroad. It was built to haul those heavily loaded lumber cars up and down those steep, rough, windy mountain tracks at a nice slow speed. Won't go faster than about 15 miles an hour, but it can pull that tonnage up and down the hillside. That's what it was built to do. It's called the Shay locomotive, spelled S-H-A-Y. Named after its inventor, Sir Ephraim Shay, who was a logger from the state of Michigan. Built by the logger, for the logger. It's all powered on the right-hand side. They nicknamed the Shays the Sidewinders because of this. Check it out. All on the right are the mechanical muscles that make all the wheels roll. She's got 3 vertical steam cylinders, pushing 3 huge pistons up and down. Those pistons have a 10-inch bore and a 12-inch stroke, all working to spin the rotating crankshaft at the bottom, spinning round and round. That spinning crankshaft then connects to both of the trucks with big ring and pinion gears that power each and every wheel underneath that machine. Now that Shay locomotive up front was built in October of 1912. That's the same year the Titanic ship sunk. No relation. But without a doubt, that is a 112-year-old workhorse geared to take you up and down this steep mountain. It's our very first steam engine, that's why it's our number 1. Been operating here since 1963. The engine's name is Dixiana. That's in honor of her last resting place, because it's good luck to rename an old steam engine where it used to work. This one was abandoned, retired, forgotten about, and left to collect rust, right next to the old coal mine it used to work at, located back in the town of Dixiana, Virginia. Dixiana's the name, we call her Dixie for short. The engine was originally built in 1912 as a coal-fired steam engine. They'd shovel that black coal all day long into that hot fire box. To keep the fire going, boil the water to make that steam pressure. So sitting behind that hot boiler in the cab of the steam engine, it's about 150 degrees constantly. Our boys get cooked alive for your entertainment. Thankfully, they don't have to shovel any coal here. When the engine arrived at Roaring Camp back in 1962, it was converted to burn oil for the fuel. That is an oil-fired steam locomotive. Now the type of oil it burns comes from all of your automobiles. It burns recycled and reclaimed motor oil. Clean and efficient too. Now Dixiana up front is taking you through this beautiful protected redwood forest. This is a very lucky neck of the woods. This is actually the world's very first protected redwood preserve that was ever saved from being logged. Way back in 1867, we have 181 acres of prime and old-growth virgin redwood forest that was all set aside from ever being logged. These are the tallest types of trees in the world, the coastal redwoods. Their scientific name is Sequoia sempervirens. That translates roughly from Latin to English to the always living redwood. Sequoia sempervirens. Now they only grow in one spot on the planet, right here on California's northern coastline. That's all because they depend on the cool, moist air from California's northern Pacific fog belt. Redwoods need that fog to survive through our dry seasons. And that limits them to what's now their last stand, averaging only 2 to 20 miles inland away from the coastline at any point, but up and down about 500 miles top to bottom of redwoods, starting at about the California-Oregon border, working their way down the coast to about Big Sur, just below us here. Now, most of that redwood forest is nothing what you guys see here. Back to the 1860s, right after that big California gold rush, right behind the miners came the loggers. These were known as the lumberman's dream by the 1860s, and today, only 4% of actual old-growth redwood forest still exists. 96% of this original forest has been harvested for its lumber over the years. Good thing that axe has never fallen here on this property. Family brakeman and aisle coming around to stamp your tickets. Or it's a long hike down. Find you. Let's start getting those tickets ready, please. And also get ready for a great photo op here. This is one of the most scenic shots of our journey. We're now starting to cross Indian Creek Trestle, a very curvy bridge that stands 42 feet high above the redwood forest floor. And it also wraps around some of our largest and oldest redwood trees on this property. A lot of these real big ones, with these thick, wide, girthy trunks, 10, 12 plus feet diameter, they're well over 1,000 years old. They're also standing at about 275 feet tall. Average lifespan is about 800 to 1,000 years, but that's average for redwoods. In really good conditions, the mighty coastal redwood trees can reach heights above 350 feet and live a very long life of up to 2,200 years old. Perhaps even more in rare cases. Now we're going to show you what the founder of this railroad actually intended to do best. Show what a Shay locomotive was actually built to do. This engine is now working. She's chugging. She's bogging down and feeling the burn as she starts to climb the steep hillside right here. We're now sending this train straight up the mountain. Your regular steam engines may be spinning out. Couldn't keep any traction on those huge driver wheels. They keep it on the flatlands. Same thing with today's modern diesel electrics, like those big, heavy Amtrak trains that go across country. They keep it super flat, extra straight, kind of boring. We really go for all that struggle here. That's what it's all about at Roaring Camp. Working this old Shay locomotive and replicating what an authentic 1880s logging railroad would have actually looked like back in that day. No trees ever harmed in the making of these tracks, since these ancient, protected, old-growth redwoods have the right-of-way. Just built to look like a logging line, the super steep, windy grades on this narrow gauge track. Now they call a steep grade on the mainline track somewhere around 1-2% at the most. That's what we call flat. Right now we're working on this incredibly steep 8.5% grade. So every 100 feet that we travel forward, we're also rising 8.5 feet up in the air. The power of fire and water at its finest, just like the loggers did it back in the day. Well, in order to live so long and grow so tall, these redwood trees have adapted many great survival strategies. You've probably noticed a good amount of them, especially near the base. All have fire damage, black and charred marks on the lower part of their trunk, some more so than others. A lot more obvious one would be a big giant hole at the bottom of the tree. A lot of these mature redwoods will have a big hollowed out cavity at the base of their trunk. Inside the hollowed opening, real burnt, charred up, and black in the middle. That's a big fire scar that tree has suffered. A lot of these trees have been through several fires over their lives and have survived it just fine. Redwoods are incredibly fire resistant, just about impervious to the heat altogether. Now the height of the redwood is a big advantage, especially on the older and more mature trees. The lower branches start growing in for about 80 to 100 feet or higher up that tree's big massive trunk, making it really hard for the fire to climb any ladder to get up to that canopy. Next line of defense is very thick and fibrous protected bark. On the mature redwoods, that bark can get as thick as 12 inches wrapped around the entire tree's trunk. There's a good 1 foot fire-resistant shield. In addition to that, also it makes the redwood trees look red, giving them the beautiful hardwood in the center core, along with the textbook cinnamon reddish brown bark. The high content of tannins in the redwoods. For starters, these tannins are incredibly fire retardant. It also helps the redwoods with many other things. The tannins are an insecticide too, keeping all the bugs and the insects away. Even those pesky termites do not attack and invade the redwood lumber. The tannins are also making the redwood trees incredibly resistant to all types of forest fungus and diseases. You typically don't see any moss, mushrooms, or any fungus at all that grows on redwoods. Now, in some of the trees you've seen with burn scars up to this point, those date back at least a couple of 100 years. They slowly heal these fire wounds. We haven't had natural fire throughout this entire property since at least the 1860s. Up and off to the left-hand side of the train, see another set of tracks. That was the start of our spiraling corkscrew trestle. There was 2 different bridges we used to cross that steep canyon. The bridges would make a giant circular loop called the corkscrew trestle. The low bridge is down on the left and right above the steam locomotive right now. Look up on either side of the tracks for the remains of that tall bridge that used to be 94 feet high. That bridge would wrap around the trunks of these big redwoods. But it all got destroyed back in the summer of 1976, unfortunately. Arsonists burnt these bridges down and never got caught. Look at all the fire damage, especially on the big redwoods out to the left out there. They were completely engulfed in flames for almost 3 days. In fact, a giant fireball rose about 300 feet above the tops of these burning canopies here, and all that thick black smoke was seen from San Francisco. If the trees are alive and healthy and they've made great recoveries since that fire, they bounce right back. Hey everybody, hang on to your seats now. We're not running out of steam pressure, we're running out of track. We've now reached the dead end and we're going to switch rails and back up the next hill. To get around where those bridges got burnt in the canyon, we built a switchback track, and we'll be zigzagging our way back and forth, gaining a lot of elevation in a very short amount of space, as this is the steepest part of this entire railroad. Here we go. Backing up. Hope you guys didn't eat a big old greasy lunch like I did before you hopped on. That can hold us back here. Sienna weighs 42 tons and she's going to be backing about 70 tons worth of train cars behind her up the steepest set of any narrow gauge tracks in all of North America. We're now going up at 10.5% grade. Every 100 feet we back up, we rise 10.5 feet. We made it. No one had to get out to help push. Welcome up to Hallelujah Junction. It's another dead end. Switching rails again one more time, continuing our climb forward. Next stop will be up top for our break at Baer Mountain. Now for those of you seated on the left-hand side, left side of the train, right up there where the engine is now, that's the mark. Look down below, down over the edge there. It's a great overhead view with a burned-out trestle. Here on the right side, I'm sorry. Hang on and you'll catch it on the way down. Patience is key. Now, a very common way the redwoods grow, you'll notice they'll form big groups and clusters of trees, all standing in the front real close to each other. Up and off to the left-hand side of the engine up there is a great example of how they thrive and reproduce. One big happy family of trees, all sharing one big mega root system. They're all genetically identical to one another with the exact same DNA. Main way they propagate, reproduce about 90% of the time is right from the root system. Send up a little baby sapling, a little shoot sprouting right from the roots of their parent or their mother tree. Mama's that big one in the middle. This grove on the left has many mother trees. Right around each mother's base, you'll notice many small little middle-aged ones, saplings. Those sprout right near the base of the mother, called basal sprouts. Those little basil sprouts have the exact same DNA as their mama, and she clones herself again and again, just re-sprouting and regenerating from the root system. That's how the redwoods do it. Now the roots live much longer than all the trees. All the redwoods have a max life of about 2,200 years. The roots underneath can live up to 10,000 years, constantly reproducing one generation after the next, again and again, all from that same original root system. Now these big groups and circular pattern trees like that are known as fairy rings and also called cathedral groves. Now the other way they reproduce, about 5 to 10% of the time, are from the seeds. And the world's tallest type of tree, the redwood, has the tiniest little cone ever. The redwood cone is only about 3/4 of an inch long, packed full of about 100 to 150 tiny microscopic dormant seeds. The reason they struggle from germinating from the seedlings so much is because of lack of regular routine fire. They haven't had natural fires here since somewhere in the 1860s or so, maybe prior to that. What you're looking at on this forest floor is almost 200 years of all these big dead logs piled up. All the redwood dust, a layer of dead needles. It's all dry fuel waiting to ignite on the forest floor, as well as all these other types of plants, invasive species, and non-native trees. The fire gets rid of all that, thins the forest out, and dries out the seedlings that can be dispensed from inside the cone. The seedling's never going to have a chance to germinate unless it hits the bare, mineral-rich soil. That's where the fire comes through and cleans up the entire forest floor. High nitrogen-rich ash on top of that bare, mineral soil. Then the seedlings will really start taking off. Now here in the Santa Cruz Mountains, before humans settled by the 1850s, fires are a pretty frequent thing naturally, every couple of decades on average. A big fire would just rip through an entire forest like this, manage the forest, and allow them to resprout from the seed. All the other types of trees pretty much turn into ash and rubble. The redwoods get charred, they survive, and they actually bounce back and grow back stronger after those fires. Just before we arrive for our stop at Baer Mountain, we're going to pass by another big redwood cathedral grove. It'll be coming up on the left, and this one's just about a perfect circle of mature trees. It's also a very common wedding ceremony site. You can reserve your own private steam train just for the wedding guests. You can pull to the top of this hill by Miss Dixie Anna and have your ceremony take place in this ring of redwoods. Just starting to come into view on the left-hand side of the train. Just hang out of the seats as the train comes to a stop. You'll notice the restrooms are off to the right. Big red building, the porcelain office. Keep the seat, wait for the whistle. There it is, it's now safe to deboard. Welcome to Baer Mountain. It's a pretty short break. In approximately 8 minutes time, we're going to give you the signal to come back and return to your seat. That signal will be 4 whistles. I've got a big shot of steam coming up here, up front of that locomotive. Don't worry if you missed it. At the end of the train ride, we'll do a much bigger blast of steam, all in a nice left-hand curve that'll give everyone a great angle on the shot. What you just saw there was a little one, well, that's a blowdown from the boiler, which is routine boiler maintenance. We're boiling all that water, evaporating it, turning it into steam. But when it gets left behind, it gets trapped in the boiler with all the minerals. The minerals from the water build up and end up forming a layer of sediment that gets stuck around. And then we blast that sediment out. 200 pounds of steam pressure per square inch to clean out the boiler. Just get a brief stop up here. Well, I gotta get the switch in Now the world's two tallest types of trees are home to the native redwood forest here. Redwoods are at number one, and a very close rival on the second next. Douglas firs are the second tallest type of tree. And they're both pretty similar looking in structure. They're both really tall, big, massive trunks growing straight up in the air. All the branches way up high in that canopy starting to branch out like a bicycle. The two tall trees, the big difference, one is the coloration of their bark. Redwood's got that deep furrowed bark, cinnamon reddish tint. Douglas fir bark, very rough, very gray looking. Much darker, grayer bark, and also constantly covered in all that green fuzzy stuff. Lots of moss, mushrooms, and all the fungus that the redwoods don't get. Aside from being very tall and having much grayer bark, the next big difference is redwoods will very commonly grow in those big groups or clusters, all resprouting from the roots. Douglas firs don't do that. They rely on just seed germination only to propagate. Once seed germinates, one Douglas fir trunk will stand up growing full. Now the Douglas firs can reach heights well above 300 feet tall, just like the redwoods. But they live hardly a fraction of the lifespan. That's because they're so prone to all that tree rot. The Douglas firs do not have the tannins that fight off the forest fungus and the disease like the redwoods. Now will overcome them sooner than later. Those Douglas firs grow very fast, get very big, tall, very heavy, and all rotted out throughout the middle. Typically they can't stand more than a few hundred years because of that. Max life is 3, maybe 400 years for the Douglas firs. As a result, in the winter months, when we get all of our big rains and the heavy winds, redwoods hardly ever get pushed over by a big windstorm. The Douglas firs topple over quite easily in the winds. Always the Douglas fir trees they got to clean up across the tracks. Notice about most of those big round logs next to us, about 90% of them are all fallen Douglas firs over the years.
Làm đồ tích mỹ, theo sư mỹ,
We've been steam railroading to the world's very first protected redwood preserve here. This forest was actually first bought for the intention of logging. Back in the 1860s, there was a guy by the name of Isaac Graham, who was a clear-cut lumberjack guy out here that was just deforesting all these hills. He owned a great amount of lumber throughout these Santa Cruz mountains. But he knew he couldn't cut down all the trees himself in his lifetime, so he started selling bits and pieces of his property off to other loggers. That's when a guy named Mr. Joseph Welch came down from San Francisco. He's a prospector out here. Mr. Welch sat down with Mr. Graham. They worked out a deal. The original purchase, which consisted of roughly 375 acres of prime old-growth redwood forest, Mr. Welch bought for the price of $6,000. What a steal. Well, his plans were to clear-cut the forest, reap the benefits of all this lumber, get rich, and retire. Now, before Mr. Welch got around to logging the forest, he wrote back home to his wife in San Francisco about his big purchase. A few days later, Miss Anna Welch got the letter, and it said, "Come on out to beautiful sunny Belton, California. I got something I want to show you. You're going to love this property." She hopped on that horse and buggy and it took her a 3-day excursion up and down and over the hills from San Francisco. And on her way here, everything she had passed through these mountains had already just been completely clear-cut at that time. There was hardly any living trees left standing. And it was all tree stumps, dirt, and destruction pretty much as far as the eye could see. She had never seen an old-growth redwood forest. Then she finally got to this property, fell in love with the majesty of these trees out here. Says, "All right, honey, what are we going to do with this forest?" She had the intention of setting up on the hillside, building a little wooden log cabin, living the simple life. She just wanted to be out here in the redwoods. And he unveiled his plans. He was going to clear-cut this forest to get rich. Now, Mrs. Welch, she was so in love with the beauty of this forest that she wanted to preserve it, pass it on for future generations, something her kids and her grandchildren could see before all the trees like this were completely cleared out. Mr. Welch just wanted to make that money. They figured, they argued. Finally, one day in 1867, Mr. Welch made a great idea. He actually decided to listen to his wife. And if it wasn't for her, this forest would be long gone. We'd never have a train here. There'd still be redwoods around. They'd be about 100 years old. Most of them looking like toothpicks compared to these old growth ones we have. But the world's first redwood forest was saved by a man that wanted to cut these trees, that was talked out of it because his wife was going to divorce him if he cut the forest. 1867, this forest has been in that same private family, the Welch family. Now it's just passed down to their great-great-grandchildren. And back in 1959, when the founder of Roaring Camp came around this property, he worked out a deal with Mr. Welch. They would never sell the property, but he gave us a 99-year lease to run this train through the Redwoods. Yeah, they make a little money off of it, but for the most part, they just wanted to make sure we do a good job of continuing to preserve their forests. This all still remains private to this day. What we have on the railroad is about 181 acres. That's because the property got cut in half by the 1920s. Before the railroad was around, that's when California state park systems were opening up, preserving and protecting redwoods for the future. By the 1920s, Mr. Welch had donated half of his property to the state park system. This is what he held on to for his own private use. Now we get to run our choo-choo train through. really quench the thirst of these big, mature, and old redwoods. Each and every large redwood you see can drink up to 500 gallons of water every single day per tree. Here in the Santa Cruz Mountains, we get a lot of really wet, rainy winters. The rest of the year, it's all dry. During our few months of winter, we average about 40 to 60 inches of annual rainfall. Sometimes a lot more, maybe 100 plus. That's kind of rare. But more often than not, during the dry times, we get that heavy marine layer forming over that Pacific Ocean late at night, and then by the wee hours of the early mornings, we get that very thick layer of coastal fog. And the fog comes through these hills and passes through the canopy of the tall trees. The higher you go up the trunk of these big redwoods, the tinier the little needles get at the top. The tiny needles up high are excellent condensers of all that moisture trapped in the fog. The needles can absorb some of the moisture, but mostly it condenses down to a water drop that then falls off the tip of the needle all the way back down to the forest floor. That's called the fog drift. And it's the fog drift that waters the shallow and ancient roots of these trees throughout the dry times. Redwood roots have very shallow, only about 8 to 12 feet down at the deepest. About 8 feet is the average depth of the roots, but they go really wide instead of going deep. From the trunk, they'll go out in every direction, about 100 to 150 feet out. They're all going to twist and tangle with the neighboring trees, forming a solid connected gridlock. That's how they get the strength and hold up through all the heavy storms, and also how they can sip that fog through the air. Why they're on the last final stand here in the coastal regions of Northern California, where the fog rolls, the redwood tree grows. About 40% of moisture every year is just from the fog for this forest. Now just a brief stop here. Everyone get your cameras ready for that big final blowdown on the left-hand side coming up. We're going to flush all that sediment out. Lots of steam. Ready or not, here it comes. But wait, there's more. That's all, folks. How's that for a 7? I'd like to thank you all for joining us here today at Roaring Camp, steaming away with us with the beautiful redwoods. If you had a nice trip, my name's Don. I'm your conductor. If you didn't have a good trip, my name is not important. You're on board Amtrak. Gotta have at least one Amtrak too. If you guys have any questions after you get off the train, feel free to find me dressed in black near the back, looking just like a penguin. Now this is the most dangerous part of our journey yet. We're turning back into civilization. Please hang on to those seats all the way to our full, complete stop at the station as we line the locomotive up underneath that giant water tower. You'll know when it's safe to get out your seat when you hear that final whistle blow after the stop. Welcome back to reality. Have a great day. Thanks for riding, everyone.
This potato. There you are.